Al had seen 17 species fall before the might of the Dominion. He had watched civilizations crumble and worlds submit to his people's rule. In his 40 years of service, he had learned one simple truth. The strong ruled and the weak served. This was the natural order of the galaxy. He stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Conquest, the flagship of the invasion fleet. Through the massive window, he watched a small blue planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. The humans called it Earth. Soon, they would call it a territory of the Dominion. "Beautiful, is it not?" Lord's voice came from behind him. Al turned and lowered his head in respect. The High Commander stood 8 feet tall, like all males. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his 4 arms were crossed over his broad chest. Golden armor covered his body, marking his rank and authority. "It is small, my lord," Al replied. "Smaller than most worlds we have conquered." Lord laughed. The sound echoed through the empty observation deck. "And the creatures who live there are even smaller. Have you seen the reports?" Al nodded. He had studied everything the scouts had gathered about humans. They were soft creatures with no natural armor. They had only 2 arms and stood barely 6 feet tall at their largest. They were short, lasting less than a century for most of them. Their technology was primitive compared to weapons and ships. "They are weak," Al said. "They are nothing," Lord corrected. "This conquest will be our easiest yet. I expect full surrender within 3 planetary rotations." The High Commander walked away, his heavy footsteps fading into silence. Al remained at the window, watching Earth grow larger as the fleet approached. 300 warships followed the Eternal Conquest. It was more than enough to crush any resistance. The first contact came 6 hours later. Al was in the command center when the human transmission arrived. The entire bridge crew watched as a human female appeared on the main screen. She wore a uniform of dark blue, and her face showed no fear. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. "You have entered human space without permission. Leave now or face the consequences." Laughter filled the command center. Officers pointed at the screen, mocking the small creature who dared to threaten them. Lord smiled and leaned forward in his command chair. "Little human," he said, "your world now belongs to the Dominion. Surrender your planet and your people will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and you will be destroyed." The human female did not flinch. "Then you have chosen war." The transmission ended. Lord waved his upper right hand dismissively. "Send the first wave. Crush their orbital defenses and prepare landing parties." 50 warships broke formation and moved toward Earth. Al watched them go, expecting the battle to last minutes at most. Human technology was primitive. Human ships were small. Human bodies were fragile. He was wrong. The human fleet appeared from nowhere. Thousands of ships emerged from hidden positions across the solar system. They came from behind the moon, from the asteroid belt, from stations hidden in the rings of distant planets. The humans had been waiting for them. Al stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The number of human ships kept climbing. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. They were smaller than vessels, but there were so many of them. "Impossible," Lord whispered. The battle began. Al watched human ships swarm the first wave like insects attacking a larger predator. They moved fast, faster than any ships he had seen before. They struck hard and then retreated before weapons could target them. Within minutes, 5 ships were burning. "They are not retreating," one officer said, his voice filled with confusion. "They should be retreating." But the humans did not retreat. When their ships were damaged, they kept fighting. When their weapons failed, they turned their ships into weapons themselves. Al watched a crippled human vessel fly directly into a cruiser. The explosion destroyed both ships. "What are they doing?" Lord demanded. No one could answer. They had no word for what they were seeing. In their culture, survival was the highest priority. A warrior who threw away his life served no purpose, but humans seemed to think differently. The first wave lost 40 ships before Lord ordered them to fall back. 3 days later, Al stood in a different room on the Eternal Conquest. This room was a prison cell, and inside it were 2 human soldiers captured during a ground assault on one of their moon bases. The male was called Captain Daniel. He was injured, with burns on his face and a broken arm that the medical staff had wrapped in bandages. The female was Lieutenant Lisa Grant. She had fought so hard during her capture that it had taken 6 soldiers to restrain her. Al studied them through the transparent barrier. They were so small, so fragile, yet they sat with their backs straight and their eyes forward, showing no fear. "You cannot win this war," Al said. "Our fleet outnumbers yours, our weapons are stronger, your defeat is certain." Daniel looked up at him. Despite his injuries, there was something in his eyes that made Al uncomfortable. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was something else entirely. "You think you know what war is," Daniel said. "You have conquered species who surrendered when they saw your strength. You have never faced an enemy who would rather die than kneel." "Then you will die," Al replied. Daniel smiled. It was a strange expression, filled with sadness and determination. "Maybe, but you have no idea what you have started. We have spent our entire existence fighting each other. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that killed hundreds of millions of our people, and we are still here." Lisa leaned forward. "Your ships are bigger, your soldiers are stronger, but you do not know how to fight someone who has nothing to lose." Al wanted to dismiss their words as the desperate claims of defeated enemies, but he had seen their ships fly into certain death. He had watched their soldiers fight with wounds that would have killed any. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. He left the cell and returned to the observation deck. Earth still hung in the darkness of space, blue and small and fragile. Somewhere on that tiny world, billions of humans were preparing to fight. For the first time in 40 years of war, Al felt something he did not recognize. It took him hours to realize it was doubt. The Battle of the Outer Rim lasted for 11 days. When it was over, Al understood that everything he knew about war was wrong. He stood in the landing bay of the Eternal Conquest, waiting to board a transport vessel. Around him, thousands of soldiers prepared for ground assault. They were the finest warriors in the Dominion, trained since birth to fight and kill. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, with armored scales and 4 powerful arms. They carried plasma rifles that could burn through steel. They were about to face humans. "The enemy has fortified a base on the 4th moon of the gas giant," the briefing officer explained. "Our task is to take the base and eliminate all resistance. Intelligence suggests approximately 3,000 human soldiers are stationed there." 3,000 humans against 10,000 warriors. The numbers should have guaranteed victory. But Al had watched the space battle from the observation deck. He had seen human ships fight with a desperation that all logic. He had seen them die rather than surrender. The transport shook as it entered the moon's thin atmosphere. Through the small windows, Al could see the human base below. It was built into the side of a crater, with thick walls and defensive towers. Human flags flew from the highest points, strange symbols of red and white and blue. "Prepare for combat," the squad leader ordered. The transport landed hard and the doors opened. Al charged out with his brothers, plasma rifle raised and ready. The cold air of the moon burned his lungs despite his breathing mask. Gravity was lighter here, making his movements feel strange and floated. Human gunfire erupted from the base walls. The first soldiers fell before they had taken 10 steps. Al dove behind a rock formation, his heart pounding in his chest. Around him, other soldiers scrambled for cover as human weapons tore through the landing zone. "Their weapons are primitive," the squad leader shouted. "Push forward." They pushed forward. Al ran with his brothers, firing his plasma rifle at the defensive towers. He saw humans fall, their bodies small and fragile against the weapons. But for every human that fell, two more seemed to take their place. They reached the outer wall after losing 50 soldiers. Warriors used explosives to blow a hole in the thick metal, and the assault force poured inside. The fighting became close and brutal. Al turned a corner and came face to face with a human soldier. The creature was small, barely reaching his chest. It wore heavy armor and carried a weapon that looked primitive and ugly. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then the human attacked. Al was faster and stronger. His forearms gave him advantages no human could match. He knocked the weapon from the human's hands and struck him with enough force to crack bones. The human flew backward and hit the wall hard. But he did not stay down. The human rose to his feet, blood running from his mouth and nose. One of his arms hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. His breathing was rough and painful. Any would have surrendered with such injuries. Any would have accepted defeat. The human charged again. Al could not understand it. He struck the human again and again, but the creature kept coming. It fought with fists and feet and teeth, biting and clawing like a wild animal. Even when Al finally put him down for good, the human was still trying to crawl forward, still trying to fight. "What are you?" Al whispered to the dying human. The soldier looked up at him with eyes that held no fear, only defiance. "I am a Marine," he said. "My name is Ben Carter, and you will remember it." He died with those words on his lips. Al stood over the body for a long moment. In his 40 years of war, he had killed many enemies, but none of them had fought like this. None of them had refused to accept defeat even when defeat was certain. The battle for the base lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of brutal combat in tight corridors and small rooms. 9 hours of watching humans fight with a ferocity that made no sense. They used everything as a weapon. They sacrificed themselves to take down single soldiers. They fought until their weapons were empty and then fought with their hands. When it was over, they had won, but the cost was terrible. 3,000 casualties, the squad leader reported to the commanders. 3,000 of our finest warriors, killed by a species we were told was primitive and weak. Al walked through the captured base, trying to understand what had happened. He found a room deep inside the structure, untouched by the fighting. The walls were covered with images, small pictures of human faces, families, children, loved ones far away on Earth. He realized then why the humans fought so hard. They were not fighting for territory or resources or power. They were fighting for the people in those pictures. They were fighting for mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, friends and lovers. Every human soldier carried the weight of everyone they loved, and they would die before they let harm come to them. They fought for conquest. The humans fought for love. Admiral Palmer's voice came over the communication channels the next day. Al listened from the command center of the Eternal Conquest, along with Lord and the other senior officers. "You have won this battle," Palmer said. His voice was calm and steady despite the defeat. "But this war is just beginning. You think you understand us because you have killed some of us. You understand nothing. Every life you take makes us fight harder. Every world you burn makes us angrier. You cannot break us by killing us. You can only make us more dangerous." Lord laughed and ended the transmission. "Human bravado, they lost their base. They will lose their world." But Al was not so sure. He had seen Ben Carter refuse to die. He had seen 3,000 humans hold 10,000 for 9 hours. He had seen the pictures on the walls. He returned to his quarters and began to write. They kept chronicles of their conquests, records of the species they had defeated. This chronicle would be different. This chronicle would be a warning. "We came to this system expecting an easy victory," he wrote. "We expected a weak species to fall before our might. We were wrong. The humans are not weak. They are simply different. They do not fight like warriors. They fight like something else entirely. They fight like parents protecting their children, and there is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than that. He put down his writing tool and looked out the window at the stars. The war had only just begun, and already he feared how it would end. The detention facility on Mars held over 500 human prisoners. Al had been assigned to oversee their interrogation. Lord wanted information about Earth's defenses, about hidden weapons, about anything that could help end the war faster. Al expected the task to be simple. Prisoners always broke eventually. Fear and pain were universal tools that worked on every species the Dominion had conquered. He had seen proud warriors weep and beg after a few days in custody. But humans were different. On his first day at the facility, Al walked through the main holding area. Hundreds of humans sat in cells built for creatures twice their size. They were injured, hungry, and far from home. They should have been broken. Instead, they were singing. The sound filled the facility, echoing off the metal walls. Human voices rose together in a song Al did not understand. The words meant nothing to him, but the meaning was clear. They were not afraid. They were not defeated. They were together, and that was enough. "Make them stop," Al ordered the guards. The guards tried. They shouted threats and cut food rations. They separated singers into isolated cells. Nothing worked. When one group was silenced, another would begin. The song moved through the facility like a living thing, impossible to kill. Al found Daniel in a small cell near the back of the facility. The human captain sat on the floor with his back against the wall. His injuries had healed somewhat, but scars still marked his face. He looked up when Al entered. "You came back," Daniel said. "I wondered if you would." "I have questions," Al replied. "You will answer them." Daniel smiled slightly. "I will tell you nothing that could harm my people, but I will talk with you if you want to understand." Al did want to understand. That was the problem. He had fought 17 species, and none of them had confused him like humans did. He sat down across from Daniel, their eyes meeting through the transparent barrier. "How do you keep fighting?" Al asked. "Your technology is weaker than ours. Your bodies are fragile. You cannot win this war, yet you refuse to surrender. Why?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Let me tell you about human history. We have been fighting since we first learned to make tools. We fought each other over land, over resources, over ideas. We created weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. We killed millions of our own kind in wars that lasted years." Al frowned. "This makes you strong, fighting among yourselves." "It made us survivors," Daniel said. "We have faced extinction many times. Ice covered our world and killed most of our species. Diseases swept across continents and left cities empty. We dropped weapons on ourselves that could burn entire countries, and we are still here. Do you understand what that means?" Al did not answer. "It means we know how to endure," Daniel continued. "It means we have looked at death and refused to accept it. Your people have conquered species who never faced real hardship. They surrendered because they did not know how to suffer. We do. We have been suffering since the beginning of our existence. You cannot break creatures who have already been broken 1,000 times and put themselves back together." The words stayed with Al long after he left the cell. He walked through the facility, watching the human prisoners. They shared their food with each other even when there was not enough. They bandaged each other's wounds with scraps of cloth. They whispered words of encouragement through the walls of their cells. He found Lisa Grant organizing the prisoners in her section. Despite her captivity, she had become a leader. She made sure the weakest prisoners received extra food. She settled disputes and kept morale high. When guards tried to intimidate her, she stared back at them without blinking. "You should cooperate," Al told her. "Things would be easier for you." Lisa looked at him with cold eyes. "Easier for you, maybe. Not for my people back home. Every day we resist is a day we give them to prepare. Every piece of information we refuse to share is a life saved. You think this is about us. It was never about us." She turned away from him, ending the conversation. Al reported to his superiors that evening. He told them the prisoners were resistant to interrogation. He suggested that human psychology was different from other species and required new approaches. Lord listened with growing impatience. "They are small and weak," the High Commander said. "Apply more pressure, they will break." More pressure was applied. The results were the same. Humans died before they betrayed their own. They endured pain that would have killed warriors. They protected each other with their own bodies when guards came to take individuals for questioning. A week later, intelligence officers brought new reports. Something was happening on Earth. Construction projects across the planet, ships being built in hidden locations, weapons of unknown design. The humans were preparing something big. "They should be focused on defending their world," Lord growled. "What are they building?" No one knew. The prisoners would not talk. Long-range scans could not penetrate human defenses. The Dominion was blind. Al returned to Daniel's cell that night. The human was awake, staring at the ceiling. He did not seem surprised to see Al. "Your people are building something," Al said. "What is it?" Daniel smiled. "Hope, we are building hope." "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer I will give." Daniel sat up and faced Al. "You have been coming to talk with me for days now. You ask questions, but I think you already know the answers. You have seen how we fight. You have seen how we endure. Something is bothering you." Al was silent. "I will tell you something," Daniel said. "Not military secrets, something else. Your people see our short lives as weakness. You live for centuries, we live for decades, but that is precisely why we are dangerous. We know our time is limited. Every moment matters to us. Every life is precious because there are so few of them. When you threaten what we love, you are not threatening something we can replace. You are threatening everything." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You will never understand what that means until you face someone with nothing left to lose. And right now, you are facing an entire planet of people with nothing left to lose. That is what you awakened when you came here. That is why you will never win." Al left the cell without another word. But Daniel's words followed him through the empty corridors, through the sleepless night, through the days that followed. Hope, the humans were building hope. He was beginning to fear what that meant. The invasion of Earth began on a morning that humans called Tuesday. Al watched from the command deck of a landing vessel as the planet grew larger in the windows. The fleet had finally broken through the human defensive lines after weeks of brutal fighting. 200 warships remained from the original 300. The humans had made them pay for every inch of space. But now the fleet was in position, and the ground assault could begin. "All units prepare for planetary insertion," Lord's voice came through the communication system. "We will land in their largest population centers, crush their resistance, show them the price of defiance." Al gripped his weapon tightly as the transport shook and burned through the atmosphere. Around him, hundreds of soldiers sat in silence. They were not joking or boasting as they had before the moon assault. They had learned to respect human soldiers. They had learned to fear them. The transport landed in a city called Chicago. Al had studied the maps and knew it was one of the largest human settlements. Millions of people lived here. The Dominion expected them to flee or surrender when they saw warriors marching through their streets. They were wrong. The first shots came from everywhere at once, from windows and rooftops, from cars and doorways, from holes in the ground that humans had dug for exactly this purpose. Al dove for cover as plasma fire and human bullets filled the air. "Contact on all sides," the squad leader shouted. "They are everywhere." The humans had turned their city into a fortress. Every building was a defensive position. Every street was a kill zone. They had prepared for this invasion with a thoroughness that shocked even veteran commanders. Al fought through streets filled with smoke and fire. He saw human soldiers die by the dozens, but more always came to replace them. They wore different uniforms and carried different weapons, but they all fought with the same desperate fury. Some were old, with gray hair and wrinkled faces. Some were young, barely more than children. All of them were willing to die. "They are using civilians," one officer reported with horror in his voice. "The civilians are fighting alongside their soldiers." Al did not understand at first. In society, warriors fought and civilians served. The two groups never mixed, but humans seemed to have no such division. When their world was threatened, everyone became a soldier. He watched a female human in ordinary clothes pick up a weapon from a fallen soldier and keep fighting. He watched males with no armor or training charge positions with nothing but determination. He watched children throw explosives from windows before being pulled back by their parents. The humans were defending their home with everything they had. General Amy commanded the defense of North America. Al learned her name from intercepted communications. She was everywhere, it seemed, coordinating attacks and organizing defenses. Her voice came through the human channels, calm and steady despite the chaos. "Hold the line," she said again and again. "Make them pay for every block, every building, every room. We do not stop fighting until there is nothing left to fight for." They took the first city after 3 days. 3 days of constant combat. 3 days of losses that exceeded all projections. When they finally raised the Dominion flag over the ruins, there was no celebration. There was only exhaustion and fear. Then the news came from Europe. The humans were using nuclear weapons. Al could not believe it at first. Nuclear weapons were meant to destroy enemies, not to be used on your own territory. But the humans had detonated them in their own cities rather than let those cities fall into hands. They were burning their own world to deny it to the invaders. "They are insane," Lord said when he received the reports. "They are absolutely insane." But Al was beginning to understand. The humans were not insane. They were desperate. They would rather destroy everything they had built than let it be taken. They would rather die free than live as servants. The fighting continued for weeks. City after city fell to the Dominion, but every victory came at a terrible cost. The forces that had seemed unstoppable at the beginning of the invasion were now scattered and bleeding. Supply lines were constantly attacked by human resistance fighters. Sleep was impossible when enemies could strike from anywhere at any time. Al found himself in a small town during a brief pause in the fighting. Most of the buildings were destroyed. Bodies lay in the streets, human and together. He walked through the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. He found them in the remains of a house. A female human lay on the ground, her body covering 2 small children. She had used herself as a shield when they attacked. The children were alive. Their mother was not. A male human appeared from the rubble. He was injured, bleeding from wounds on his face and chest. He saw Al standing over his family and screamed with rage. He picked up his dead wife's weapon and charged. Al killed him easily. The human was too weak, too injured, too slow. But even as he died, the male was still trying to reach Al, still trying to fight, still trying to protect his children. The 2 small humans stared at Al with eyes full of terror. They did not run. They did not speak. They simply waited to die. Al lowered his weapon. He could not do it. He could not kill children who had just watched their parents die. He turned and walked away, leaving them in the ruins of their home. That night, Lord gave a new order. The ground campaign was taking too long. The losses were too high. The fleet would use orbital bombardment weapons to destroy the remaining human resistance. "Burn it all," the High Commander said. "Leave nothing standing." The bombardment began at midnight. Al watched from a transport heading back to the fleet. Great beams of energy fell from the sky, striking human cities and military bases. The planet below began to glow with fire. Entire continents burned. But through the destruction, something impossible happened. Human transmissions continued, radio signals, satellite communications, messages passing between survivors across the burning world. They were not begging for mercy. They were not screaming in despair. They were coordinating a counterattack. "This is Admiral Palmer to all surviving forces," a voice said through the static. "The weapon is ready. Repeat, the weapon is ready. All ships prepare for final assault. We end this now." Al stared at the communication screen. Admiral Palmer was supposed to be dead. His ship had been destroyed in the Battle of the Outer Rim. But here was his voice, calm and commanding, calling humanity to one last fight. The humans had been hiding something, the weapon they had been building, the hope that Daniel had spoken of. And now it was ready. The hidden fleet emerged from the asteroid belt like ghosts rising from the grave. Al stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Conquest, watching in disbelief as thousands of human ships appeared on the tactical display. They had been hiding there for months, waiting for this exact moment. While the Dominion focused on the ground invasion, the humans had been preparing their final strike. Admiral Palmer commanded the fleet from the USS Vanguard, a massive warship that had been built in secret among the asteroids. His voice came through all communication channels, broadcast to every ship in the system. "You came to our world and called us weak. You burned our cities and killed our people. You thought you had won." Palmer's voice was cold and hard. "You were wrong. This ends now." The human fleet attacked from behind while they were still facing Earth. It was a perfect trap. The Dominion ships had to turn and fight on two fronts, their formation broken, their advantage lost. Lord screamed orders from the command center. "All ships engage, destroy them all." But the humans had planned this for months. Every ship knew its target. Every captain knew their role. They struck with precision and fury, tearing into the scattered fleet. Al watched the battle unfold with growing horror. Human ships swarmed warships, hitting them again and again until their shields failed. When human ships were destroyed, more came to take their place. The sky was filled with fire and death. Then he understood the true nature of the human plan. They were not trying to win. They were trying to make victory impossible. The humans were sacrificing everything, their ships, their lives, their entire military, to destroy the fleet. They did not care about survival. They cared about making sure that no one would ever invade their world again. They were showing the galaxy what happened to anyone who attacked humanity. Al left the observation deck and ran toward the detention cells. He did not know why. He only knew that he could not stay and watch anymore. He could not be part of this any longer. The prison section was in chaos. Guards had abandoned their posts to join the defense of the ship. Alarms blared and emergency lights flashed. Al moved through the empty corridors until he reached Daniel's cell. The human captain was standing, his hands pressed against the transparent barrier. He was listening to the battle through the ship's communication system. When he saw Al, his eyes widened. "You came," Daniel said. Al stood before the cell, his heart pounding. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed, demanded that he leave these prisoners and return to his duty. But he could not. He had seen too much. He understood too much. "Why?" Al asked. "Why are your people dying for this? You could have surrendered, you could have lived." Daniel smiled sadly. "And what kind of life would that be? Slaves to your dominion, our children raised to serve your empire. That is not life. That is existence. And existence without freedom is not worth having." Somewhere in the distance, an explosion shook the ship. The lights flickered. Al made his decision. He opened the cell. Daniel stepped out slowly, as if he expected a trick. Lisa appeared behind him, along with dozens of other prisoners who had gathered in the corridor. They all stared at Al with confusion and suspicion. "The escape pods are on Deck 7, Al said. "The guards are gone. You can reach them if you move quickly." "Why are you doing this?" Lisa demanded. Al did not have a good answer. He only knew that he could not be the creature he had been before. He had watched humans fight and die for each other. He had seen love that transcended fear. He had witnessed something that the Dominion would never understand. "Go," he said, "before I change my mind." The prisoners ran. Daniel was the last to leave. He stopped beside Al and placed a hand on his arm. It was a small gesture, meaningless by standards, but somehow it meant everything. "Thank you," Daniel said. "Whatever happens, remember that you chose to be better than your orders." Then he was gone. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it ended, the fleet was crippled. 112 ships remained from the original 300. The human fleet was almost completely destroyed, but they had achieved their goal. The Dominion could not continue the invasion. They did not have the strength to hold Earth. Lord ordered a retreat. It was the first time in Dominion history that an invasion force had withdrawn from a conquest. The news would spread across the galaxy. Other species would hear what happened. Other species would begin to wonder if the Dominion could be defeated. Earth burned below them as the fleet pulled away. Cities were in ruins. Continents were by orbital bombardment. Millions of humans had died. But already, Al could see human ships descending to the surface. Rescue vessels, medical transports, survivors coming to help other survivors. They were already rebuilding. Al found himself on the observation deck as the fleet entered faster-than-light travel. Earth disappeared behind them, becoming just another star in the distance. But he knew he would never forget it. He would never forget what he had seen there. A familiar voice spoke from beside him. Al turned to find Daniel standing there, dirty and exhausted but alive. The escape pod must have been picked up by the retreating fleet. "I thought you escaped," Al said. "I did, but my pod was caught in your ship's gravity field when you jumped too." Daniel moved to stand beside him at the window. "Looks like I am your prisoner again." Al shook his head. "No, you are not a prisoner, not anymore." They stood in silence, watching the stars streak past. Two creatures from different worlds who had seen each other at their worst and somehow found something to respect. "What will happen now?" Daniel asked. "I do not know. The Dominion has never lost a war. This will change things. Other species will hear about what humans did. They will remember." Daniel nodded. "Good, let them remember. Let them know that if they come for us, we will fight. We will always fight." Al looked at the human beside him, small and fragile with a short and soft skin. Everything about him suggested weakness. But Al knew better now. He had seen what humans could do when they loved something enough to die for it. "How do you still have hope?" Al asked. "Your world is burning. Millions of your people are dead. How can you possibly hope for anything?" Daniel smiled and pointed out the window toward the distant star that was Earth's sun. "Because somewhere out there, humans are helping other humans. They are pulling survivors from the rubble. They are sharing their food and water. They are holding each other and saying that everything will be okay. That is what we do. That is who we are." He turned to face Al directly. "We have each other, and that is something no one can ever take from us." Al recorded his final chronicle that night. He wrote about everything he had seen and everything he had learned. He wrote about human courage and human love and human hope. He wrote about a species that refused to surrender even when faced with extinction. "On this day we faced humans," he concluded. "We burned their worlds. We killed their people. We thought we would conquer them as we had conquered so many others. We were wrong. In trying to break them, we discovered something that cannot be broken. In trying to destroy them, we awakened something that cannot be destroyed. We learned what it means to face an enemy who fights not for power or territory, but for love. And we learned what fear truly means, not the fear of death. The fear of facing a species that will never stop fighting for what they love. I do not know what the future holds, but I know this. The galaxy will never forget what happened here, and neither will I." He put down his writing tool and looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind them, humanity was rebuilding. And the Dominion would never be the same.